The group was both excited and nervous as they approached the abandoned building. It was known among the townspeople as a place that attracted only the bravest or the most reckless. Rumors of the building being haunted had been fueled by stories of strange occurrences and unexplained disappearances. For Jenna, Mike, Emily and Ryan, the idea of exploring the building was an exhilarating adventure and a test of courage. "I can't believe we're actually doing this," Jenna said, her voice trembling with anticipation and fear. She was the most cautious of the group, always hesitant when it came to anything out of the ordinary. "You know we can't turn back now," Mike replied with a challenging smile. He was the unofficial leader of the group, always eager for a challenge. "Let's make the most of it. If we find something interesting, it could be a great story to tell." Emily, ever the curious and enthusiastic one, moved closer to the entrance, her flashlight illuminating the darkness that seemed to swallow the hallway. "I'm already excited to see what's behind these doors. Let's go." Ryan, the group's skeptic, observed everything with a look of disdain. "You know, we're probably just going to find rats and dust. But fine, I'm here to prove you're all overreacting." The group stepped through the main entrance, the wooden door creaking ominously. The interior was covered in dust and cobwebs, with old furniture shrouded in dusty sheets. The air was heavy, and the profound silence seemed to envelop each step they took. "Look at this," Mike said, pointing to a staircase leading to the upper floors. "Let's check upstairs. There might be something interesting." They climbed the stairs cautiously, the wood creaking under their feet. The corridor on the upper floor was equally abandoned, with closed doors and a few open ones revealing empty, deteriorated rooms. The group spread out, examining the place for anything that might confirm the legends. In one of the rooms, Jenna found an old broken mirror with an ornate frame covered in a layer of grime and dust. "This is kind of creepy," she said, staring at the mirror with an unsettling feeling. Emily, who was examining a bookshelf, heard a noise coming from one of the adjacent rooms. "Did you hear that? It sounded like something moving." Ryan rolled his eyes. "It's probably just the wind. Let's keep going." The group reconvened in the main hallway, where Mike was holding an ancient-looking artifact he had found in one of the rooms. "Look what I found. It seems to be some kind of amulet." Emily stepped closer to examine the object. "This is strange. It looks old and probably has a story behind it." As the group continued exploring the building, they found a hidden door in one of the hallway walls. The door was covered in symbols and ancient inscriptions that looked strange and enigmatic. "Let's open it," Mike said, a glint of excitement in his eyes. This might be where the real mystery lies. They pushed the door open, which creaked deeply, revealing an old, rusted elevator. The elevator seemed out of place, as if it hadn't been used in decades. "Do you think it still works?" Jenna asked, hesitantly. "Only one way to find out," Ryan replied, pressing the button to open the elevator doors. As the group continued exploring the building, they found a hidden door in one of the hallway walls. The door was covered in symbols and ancient inscriptions that looked strange and enigmatic. "Let's open it," Mike said, a glint of excitement in his eyes. This might be where the real mystery lies. They pushed the door open, which creaked deeply, revealing an old, rusted elevator. The elevator seemed out of place, as if it hadn't been used in decades. "Do you think it still works?" Jenna asked hesitantly. "Only one way to find out," Ryan replied, pressing the button to open the elevator doors. When the elevator finally stopped, the doors opened to reveal a floor that shouldn't exist. The group was left speechless as they realized they were in a completely different environment from what they expected. The feeling that something was deeply wrong intensified, and the atmosphere around them seemed heavier and more oppressive. "This isn't good," Jenna whispered, as everyone looked around, trying to comprehend where they were. The place had an ancient, worn appearance, with strange symbols on the walls and an environment that seemed to be constantly shifting. The sense of being watched grew stronger, and the group knew they were about to face something far beyond what they had imagined. The real terror was just beginning. And the group was about to discover that by entering that elevator, they had crossed a line between the real world and a place where their deepest fears would come to life. As the elevator doors opened, Jenna, Mike, Emily, and Ryan were greeted by a sight that defied any logical explanation. The floor they found themselves on seemed like a labyrinth of corridors and rooms, all shrouded in an unsettling darkness, illuminated only by a faint light that seemed to come from invisible sources. "This is surreal," Emily said, trying to stay calm as she observed the walls covered in symbols and inscriptions that flickered with a faint light. "Where are we?" "I have no idea, but we need to explore and see if we can find a way out," Mike responded, taking the lead. He seemed determined to uncover what was happening, despite the group's growing discomfort. The group began to walk through the corridors, their flashlights illuminating the strange and disturbing details around them. The walls were covered with tattered and old tapestries, and there was a feeling of dampness in the air, as if the place was constantly humid. "What are these symbols?" Ryan asked, closely examining a series of marks on the walls. "It looks like there's some sort of pattern." Jenna, looking around with a mix of fascination and fear, approached one of the inscriptions. It could be some form of ancient writing. "Maybe if we figure it out, we can understand what's happening here." They continued exploring, passing through several empty rooms and chambers that seemed to have been abandoned long ago. Every room they entered seemed like an echo from the past, with furniture covered by dusty sheets and old objects strewn about in disarray. In one of the rooms, Emily found an old writing desk with papers scattered across it. She began to examine the documents and found a series of letters and diaries written in a language that seemed to be a mix of symbols and familiar words. "Look at this," Emily called to the others. "These letters seem to talk about rituals and ancient practices. Maybe they were trying to do something here." Mike came closer, examining the papers. "There might be something important here. We need to find out more about these rituals and what happened to the people who were here." Meanwhile, Jenna and Ryan were investigating a room next door where they found a shelf of old books and a box of strange objects. Jenna opened the box and found a small amulet with a red stone in the center. "This seems important," Jenna said, showing the amulet to the group. "The book also talks about amulets and symbols." Ryan took the amulet, examining it carefully. "It might be a key to understanding what we're dealing with. Let's keep this in mind." The group decided to regroup in the center of the floor, where the walls seemed to tilt and the corridors curved at strange angles. The feeling of disorientation was growing, and the fear of getting lost in the labyrinth increased with every step. "I can't shake the feeling that something is watching us," Jenna said, her voice filled with unease. "The sensation is oppressive." Before they could respond, a strange and distant sound began to echo through the corridors. It sounded like a low murmur, as if someone was speaking in an incomprehensible language. The group exchanged glances, a sense of panic beginning to rise. "What is that?" Mike asked, tension visible on his face. Emily tried to locate the origin of the sound. "It seems to be coming from that direction." She pointed to a dark, narrow corridor at the end of the floor. The group cautiously headed toward the corridor, their flashlights trembling as the sound intensified. As they advanced, the walls began to look wetter and covered in dark stains, as if the place was deteriorating rapidly. When they reached the end of the corridor, they found a rusty iron door. The sound was clearly coming from inside the room. Mike, taking a deep breath, pushed the door open with a deep creak. The room was dark, with a single candle lit in the center, illuminating a circle of strange symbols drawn on the floor. "What is this?" Jenna whispered, looking at the symbols with a mix of fear and fascination. In the center of the circle was an old book, with a worn leather cover and yellowed pages. Mike approached and picked up the book, opening it carefully. The pages were filled with diagrams and texts in an ancient language, but some words were legible. "This seems to be a manual for rituals," Mike said, examining the content. "It might be what they used to do, whatever happened here." As the group studied the book, the candle began to flicker, and the room grew colder. The feeling that something was wrong grew even stronger, and an invisible presence seemed to manifest, enveloped in an aura of fear and uncertainty. "We should get out of here," Jenna said, her voice trembling. "Something isn't right." The group agreed and began to head back to the elevator, trying to ignore the growing sense of panic. The fear and the feeling that something was about to happen grew with every step. When they finally reached the elevator, they found that the cabin was dark and the button for the main floor was unresponsive. The elevator seemed to have stopped working, and the group was trapped on the unknown floor with the feeling that the real battle was just beginning. The group tried to stay calm as the elevator remained stuck, its lights flickering irregularly. The feeling of being trapped in a strange, oppressive place was growing, and the anxiety was palpable. Jenna, Mike, Emily, and Ryan gathered around the elevator, trying to decide what to do next. "This can't be happening," Jenna said, her voice trembling. "We need to get out of here." Mike tried repeatedly pressing the button for the main floor, but the elevator didn't respond. "It looks like we're stuck. We need to think of another way out of here." Emily looked around, observing the environment that seemed to subtly change over time. "We can't stay here. If the building's energy is interfering, it might be better to explore more and see if we can find an alternative exit." Reluctantly, the group decided to venture back into the unknown floor. The feeling that something was following them was growing, and fear seemed almost tangible. The building's walls seemed to pulse and move as if they were alive. They walked back through the corridors, now with a sense of disorientation and confusion. The markings and symbols on the walls seemed to change shape and appearance, and the environment was immersed in a growing climate of tension. "Things are getting stranger by the minute," Ryan commented, looking at the symbols that seemed to rearrange constantly. "I feel like we're in a nightmare." As they advanced, they reached a room that seemed different from the others. The room was large and circular, with a dome ceiling covered in a web of cracks that seemed to emanate a faint glow. In the center of the room was a stone table with a large open book on it. "This book," Emily said, approaching the table. "Is it the same book we saw before?" Mike approached the table, examining the book closely. "It looks like it, but now there's something different. Look, there's a new handwritten section." He flipped through the pages until he found the additional section. The words were written in strange handwriting and seemed to describe a specific ritual. "This is a guide to escape," Mike read aloud. "It talks about a portal and a way to return to the real world." Emily, who was observing the surroundings, noticed something strange. "Something is moving. Look at the cracks in the ceiling." The cracks began to glow with a sinister light, and the light emanated seemed to form complex patterns that intertwined, creating a hypnotic effect. The group stood frozen, fear and fascination mingling as they watched. "What is that?" Jenna asked, trying to stay calm. Suddenly, an invisible presence seemed to manifest in the room. A cold, icy wind began to blow, and the murmurs they had heard earlier became clearer and more intense, as if distant voices were whispering ancient secrets. "We need to follow what the book says," Mike said, trying to keep his voice steady. "It looks like there's a way to activate the portal." Emily and Ryan began searching for anything in the room that could be used in the ritual described in the book. They found some ancient objects and symbols carved into the stone table and began arranging them according to the instructions. "This is crazy," Ryan said, his voice full of panic. "I can't believe we're actually doing this." "If we don't try, we'll be stuck here forever," Jenna replied, trying to hold on to hope. "Let's follow the instructions and see if we can." The group followed the book's instructions carefully, positioning the objects and drawing symbols on the floor. As the ritual unfolded, the room began to vibrate, and the cracks in the ceiling glowed with a more intense light. The sound of the murmurs became deafening, and a sense of pressure increased around them. When the ritual was complete, a form of a portal began to take shape in the center of the room. It was a swirling opening of light and shadow, with a palpable sense of energy that seemed to pull everything toward it. "It's working!" Emily shouted, her voice filled with relief and fear. "Let's head for the portal." The group approached the portal, their emotions mixed between hope and terror. As they advanced, the portal began to close slowly, as if trying to refuse their entry. The room was in turmoil, with the cracks glowing and the pressure increasing. Jenna was the last to enter, looking back with a look of fear. "Let's get out of here," she shouted. With one last effort, the group crossed the portal and was enveloped in a wave of light and darkness. The environment around them seemed distorted and spinning, and they felt a sense of disorientation as they were pulled out of the unknown space. When they finally emerged, the group found themselves back in the abandoned building, on the same floor where they had started. However, the environment was quieter, and the sense of oppression had disappeared. They were back in the real world, but the experience had marked them in profound and lasting ways. "We're back," Mike said, looking around. But what was that? What just happened? Reality seemed to recover slowly, and the group began to understand that although they were back, the experience had left an indelible mark on their lives. The abandoned building was now a place that carried memories of terror and the knowledge that the unknown was much closer than they could have imagined. Part 4. Echoes of the Past. The group was back on the floor of the abandoned building they knew, but the environment seemed to have changed. The walls were cleaner, and the oppressive atmosphere had diminished, giving way to an unsettling silence. Jenna, Mike, Emily, and Ryan were out of breath, trying to process what they had just experienced. "We're back, but something doesn't feel right," Mike said, his voice echoing in the silent corridor. "This seems different now." "I agree," Emily replied, looking around with distrust. "But what do we do now? We can't just ignore what happened." Ryan, still shaken by the experience, began pacing in circles. "We need to get out of here as quickly as possible. I really don't want to stay here any longer." The group decided to leave the building as quickly as possible. As they descended the stairs, the environment seemed to change again. The building was quieter than usual, and the fear that something might be following them was constantly present. When they reached the ground floor, they were confronted by an even more disturbing scene. The main entrance, which had previously been covered in debris and seemed completely blocked, was now clean and open, as if the building was inviting them to leave. The group hesitated for a moment, feeling as though something was waiting for them outside. "We can't stay here another minute," Jenna said, her voice filled with urgency. "Let's go." The group exited the building and found themselves in the daylight, but the sense of relief was mixed with a lingering unease. The environment around them seemed normal, but what they had experienced continued to haunt their minds. As they walked down the street, they tried to calm down and discuss what they had found. Emily pulled out the old book that had been the focus of the ritual. "Maybe we should take this to a specialist. There might be more information about what we faced." "I agree," Mike said. "We need to understand what was happening and how we can deal with it in the future." The group decided to take the book to a local researcher known for his interest in paranormal phenomena. They scheduled a meeting for the next day, hoping he could shed some light on what they had experienced. The next morning, they arrived at the researcher's office, an elderly man named Dr. Thompson, who greeted them with an intrigued look and a slight smile. "So, you have something interesting to show me?" Dr. Thompson asked, examining the book with a curious gaze. Mike briefly explained what had happened, and Dr. Thompson began flipping through the pages of the book, examining the symbols and inscriptions carefully. "This is an ancient book," Dr. Thompson said. "It seems to be a manual on rituals and occult practices. The symbols and diagrams indicate that it may have been used to open portals to other dimensions or realities." Emily, standing nearby, asked anxiously, "And how can we prevent this from happening again? What can we do?" Dr. Thompson looked at the group with a serious expression. "These rituals and symbols are quite powerful. What you encountered was a manifestation of your own anxieties and fears, amplified by this dimension. Unfortunately, there's no guarantee you can protect yourselves completely, but the best thing is to avoid using any objects or symbols related to these rituals. The group thanked Dr. Thompson and bid him farewell, feeling somewhat relieved but still deeply disturbed by the experience. The knowledge that they had dealt with forces beyond human understanding left a lasting mark on their lives. As they walked out of the office, Jenna broke the silence. "What now? What do we do with all of this?" "We need to move on and try to find a way to overcome what we experienced," Mike replied. "Maybe we should share our story so others can be aware of the dangers we faced." The group agreed, deciding to document their experiences and share their findings with the community to help others who might encounter similar situations. They knew that although they had escaped the nightmare, the experience had left a scar that would be difficult to erase. They returned to their homes, trying to return to normalcy, but the persistent fear and memories of what they had faced continued to haunt their minds. They found solace in their friendship and mutual support, and began working on their own ways of coping with the trauma. The experience in the abandoned building had changed their lives forever, and the fear of the unknown was now a part of their realities. The feeling that the terror could manifest again was always present, a dark reminder that the world was much more mysterious and terrifying than they could have imagined. As life continued, the group remained united, facing their fears and seeking answers to the unexplained. They knew that the journey was far from over, and that in dealing with the unknown, they needed to be prepared to face whatever might come next. After the meeting with Dr. Thompson, the group tried to return to normalcy in their lives, but the experience in the abandoned building continued to haunt them. The nights were filled with nightmares, and the feeling that something was still following them never left. Jenna, Mike, Emily, and Ryan gathered to discuss how they could deal with their anxieties and continue with their lives. "I can't stop thinking about what we saw," Jenna said, her tone revealing exhaustion and anxiety. "It's like it marked us forever." "I agree," Mike said, trying to keep his composure. "But we need to find a way to move forward. Maybe we should do a spiritual cleansing or something." "I've researched this," Emily interjected. "There are some techniques that can help clear negative energy and help us overcome the fear." The group decided to follow Emily's suggestions and began exploring methods to relieve the tension and fear they had acquired. They experimented with various spiritual cleansing techniques, including using sacred herbs and guided meditations. Although some of these practices provided temporary relief, the feeling that something was wrong never completely disappeared. As they tried to recover, Jenna received an anonymous message on her phone. The message contained a photo of the abandoned building and a note that read, "You shouldn't have left. The game is just beginning." Jenna's heart raced. She showed the message to the group, who were alarmed. "This isn't good," Mike said, looking at the photo with a worried expression. "Someone seems to know what we did and is trying to scare us." "We need to find out who's behind this and why," Emily suggested. "We can't let this consume us. We should investigate." The group began investigating the origin of the message and found that the phone number it was sent from was registered under a false name with no additional information. The feeling of being watched was constant, and the group was becoming increasingly uncomfortable. Meanwhile, Ryan, who had been the most skeptical of the group, began experiencing strange events in his home. Objects moved on their own, doors opened and closed without explanation, and he heard whispers at night. His experience increased the fear among the friends. "Something is happening," Ryan said, his voice trembling. "I feel like my house is becoming a terrifying place." "We need a more intense approach," Mike decided. "If someone is trying to scare us, maybe we need to face this fear head-on." The group decided to return to the abandoned building to confront their anxieties and see if there was anything else that could explain the recent events. Upon arrival, the building appeared as silent and deserted as before, but there was a palpable sense of anticipation in the air. "Are we really doing this?" Jenna asked, hesitant. "What if it makes things worse?" "We have to face it," Mike replied. "We need to find out what's going on and make sure we're safe." The group entered the building and made their way to the unknown floor. The sense of discomfort grew with each step. The environment seemed to be constantly changing, with corridors that seemed to stretch and doors that appeared and disappeared. When they reached the center of the floor, where the ritual had been performed, they found the portal room, but the book and symbols were gone. The room was empty, but an invisible presence still seemed to surround them. "Where are the symbols?" Emily asked, looking around. "And the book?" "This is strange," Mike said, running his hand over the surface of the stone table. "It looks like everything was removed." Suddenly the lights began to flicker, and a strange sense of cold enveloped the room. The group felt as if an invisible force was approaching, and fear once again took hold of their hearts. "We need to get out of here," Jenna said, her voice trembling. "We can't stay here any longer." As the group prepared to leave, a figure appeared at the entrance to the room. It was an indistinct silhouette, a presence that seemed to manifest from the shadows. What is that?" Ryan whispered, feeling a deep sense of terror. The figure slowly approached, and a distorted, dark voice echoed through the room. "You cannot escape so easily. The game is not over yet." The group, in panic, ran back to the elevator, but the doors seemed to be locked by an invisible force. The environment around them was becoming increasingly hostile and terrifying. "We need to find another way out," Mike shouted. They ran through the corridors, desperately searching for an escape. The feeling of being hunted and the growing terror drove them to seek an exit, while the invisible presence seemed to always be one step behind. Finally, they found an emergency staircase that seemed to lead outside the building. They hurriedly descended, the sense of relief growing as they moved away from the building. When they emerged outside and back into the daylight, they were exhausted and terrified. The fear and sense of being pursued still lingered, and they knew the experience had left a lasting mark on their lives. "That was much worse than before," Emily said, her face pale. "We need help dealing with this." The group agreed to seek therapy and professional support to cope with the trauma. Although they had escaped the building, they knew the echoes of what they had experienced would continue to haunt their lives. The feeling that something was lurking, waiting to manifest again, was a constant reminder that the terror they faced was only part of a much larger game. After the terrifying experience in the abandoned building, the group began to seek professional help. They started attending therapy sessions, both individually and as a group, to deal with the trauma and the persistent fear they had acquired. The experience had left deep scars and a constant feeling that they were being watched. During one of the sessions, Dr. Thompson, the researcher who had helped the group, reached out again. He wanted to discuss new findings about the book and the events that had occurred. "I've found some additional information about the book," Dr. Thompson began, his tone serious. "It appears there's an occult tradition related to these rituals that wasn't previously documented." The group gathered with Dr. Thompson in his office, where he informed them about a secret sect with a history of performing rituals to open portals and manipulate dimensions. The inscriptions in the book were associated with ancient practices dating back centuries and were known to be highly dangerous. "What does this mean for us?" Mike asked, his concern evident. "It could mean that you've been targeted by something far more sinister than you imagined," Dr. Thompson explained. "If this sect is still active, they may be trying to use you in some way." A chill ran down the group's spines as they heard this. The fear that they might be in real danger intensified. They were being watched and hunted, but now it seemed there was an organization behind it, making the situation even more threatening. To protect themselves and understand the situation better, the group decided to investigate further. They began researching the mentioned sect and discovered a series of unexplained events and disappearances associated with it. It seemed the sect was involved in practices aimed at manipulating space-time and exploring alternative dimensions. In one of their investigations, Jenna found a reference to an ancient legend about an artifact that could seal portals and prevent forces from other dimensions from entering the real world. She shared the discovery with the group, and they all agreed it was an important lead. "If we find this artifact, maybe we can close the portal and end this threat," Jenna said. The group followed the lead to an old library mentioned in their research. The library was located in an ancient part of the city and appeared to be a repository of esoteric and historical knowledge. Upon arrival, they were greeted by an elderly librarian who seemed to know a great deal about the legends and occult traditions. He guided them to a special section of the library where they found books and manuscripts about the sect and the artifacts associated with it. "This book is a valuable source," the librarian said, handing an old book to the group. "It talks about the artifact you're looking for and how it can be used to seal portals." With the new information in hand, the group began studying the book and preparing a plan to find the artifact. The instructions in the book were complex and involved a series of rituals and trials they needed to overcome to obtain the artifact and use it correctly. As they prepared for the search, strange events continued in their lives. Ryan began noticing signs that the invisible presence was manifesting again in his home. Objects continued to move on their own, and he heard whispers at night, as if the terror they had faced was trying to manifest once more. "This is becoming unbearable," Ryan said, visibly shaken. "I feel like we're being watched all the time." The group understood the seriousness of the situation and decided to double their efforts to find the artifact and seal the portal. They knew time was running out, and the threat was becoming increasingly real. With the knowledge gained from the library and the determination to resolve the situation, the group prepared for the next phase of their journey. They knew they would face even greater challenges and dangers, but they were determined to prevent the terror from continuing to haunt their lives. The feeling of being watched never completely left, and the awareness that the sect might still be active and searching for them added a new level of fear. However, the hope of finding the artifact and closing the portal gave them a reason to keep fighting. The group was ready to face the next challenge, knowing their journey was far from over and that the terror they had faced was about to manifest in even more intense ways. The quest for the artifact and the battle against the sect would be their greatest trials yet, and they were determined not to let fear dominate their lives. The search for the artifact led the group to a remote mountainous region where an ancient abandoned monastery was the next clue in their journey. They believed the artifact was hidden there, protected by challenges and riddles they would need to solve. Jenna, Mike, Emily, and Ryan prepared for the trip, fully aware that they were venturing into unknown and potentially dangerous territory. Upon arriving at the monastery, they found a deteriorated structure, covered in moss and almost completely consumed by time. The monastery's walls were imposing, and the atmosphere around it was laden with a sinister feeling. The group took a deep breath and entered the building, where the air was heavy, and light barely filtered through the broken windows. "This place is really creepy," Emily commented, glancing around, "but we have to keep moving." "I agree," Mike responded, trying to stay calm. "Let's start looking." The book we studied mentioned that the artifact might be hidden somewhere deep in the monastery. The group began exploring the dark and damp corridors of the monastery, searching for any signs that might indicate the artifact's location. They found several old deserted rooms, some containing relics and ancient symbols related to the sect they were investigating. In one of the rooms, Jenna discovered an ancient inscription on a wall, which seemed to be a riddle. The riddle was written in an ancient language and appeared to indicate the location of a specific place within the monastery. "This riddle must lead us to the artifact," Jenna said, examining the inscription closely. "We need to decipher it." The group worked together to translate the riddle and solve the puzzle. Each clue led to a new challenge, and with each step, the feeling that something was watching them grew stronger. The atmosphere in the monastery seemed to become increasingly oppressive, and fear began to manifest once again. After solving the riddle, the group was led to a hidden room behind a secret wall. The room was filled with antiquities and ancient artifacts, and at its center stood a pedestal with a mysterious box. "This must be it," Mike said, approaching the pedestal. "The artifact must be inside this box." When Mike opened the box, he found a small, strange object, an amulet with ancient symbols engraved on it. The amulet seemed to radiate a subtle energy, and the group felt a wave of relief mixed with a growing fear. "This is what we were looking for," Emily said, picking up the amulet. "Now we need to figure out how to use it to seal the portal." As the group examined the amulet, a sense of unease grew. The monastery seemed to be growing darker and colder, and the group felt a threatening presence approaching. It was as if the building itself was reacting to the artifact's presence. "Something isn't right," Ryan said, looking around with a worried expression. "I feel like we're in danger." Suddenly, a shadowy figure appeared at the entrance of the room, its presence imposing and menacing. It was a nebulous entity with indistinct contours and an aura of malevolence. The same figure they had seen in the abandoned building now seemed to be manifesting again, this time with even greater intensity. "You shouldn't have meddled with what you don't understand," the figure said in a distorted, threatening voice. "Now you will have to pay the price." The group, overcome with panic, tried to defend themselves, but the entity seemed invulnerable and powerful. The surrounding environment began to crumble, and the monastery's walls trembled as if they were about to collapse. "We have to use the amulet," Jenna shouted, trying to keep her composure. "It's all we've got." The group gathered their strength and began performing the ritual described in the book, using the amulet as the center of the process. They followed the instructions carefully as the entity continued to threaten them, and the monastery became increasingly unstable. As the ritual progressed, the entity began to writhe and lose its form, as if it were being repelled by the amulet's energy. The environment around them began to stabilize, and the oppressive feeling started to fade. Finally, with one last effort, the group completed the ritual, and the amulet emitted an intense light that enveloped the room. The entity vanished, and the monastery returned to a state of calm. "We did it," Mike said, gasping for breath. The amulet worked. With the danger seemingly averted, the group felt a wave of relief and exhaustion. They had managed to obtain the artifact and use its powers to confront the entity, but the trauma and fear were still present. "What do we do now?" Emily asked, looking at the amulet with a mix of relief and apprehension. "We need to ensure the artifact is kept safe," Mike replied, "and continue our fight against the sect if necessary." The group decided to take the amulet back to Dr. Thompson to ensure it was properly protected and studied. Although they had won a battle, they knew the fight against the unknown and the forces they had faced was far from over. They were determined to move forward, but the fear and the sense that something was lurking continued to follow them, reminding them that the journey was far from over. Back at Dr. Thompson's office, the group handed over the amulet to the researcher, who examined the artifact with great interest. The atmosphere was tense, with the feeling that what they had experienced was only beginning to reveal its true dimensions. "This amulet is an object of great power," Dr. Thompson said, studying the symbols engraved on the artifact. "It appears to have the ability to seal portals, as you mentioned, but there's still much we need to understand about it." "What more can we do?" Jenna asked, visibly worried. "I feel like the threat isn't over yet." Dr. Thompson sighed and settled into his chair. "We need to investigate the sect behind all this more deeply. If they're still active, they may be planning something bigger. I have some connections in the academic and esoteric worlds who can help us uncover more." The group decided to join Dr. Thompson in his investigation, knowing they needed all the information they could gather to face the sect and its intentions. They began working together, analyzing ancient documents and researching the sect's history, while Dr. Thompson consulted his contacts and specialized sources. During one of their work meetings, Emily found a reference to a secret meeting of the sect scheduled to take place at an unidentified location. The information was in an old manuscript that mentioned a final ceremony that was set to happen soon. "This seems important," Emily said, showing the manuscript to the group. "If this ceremony is what I think it is, it could be an attempt to open a permanent portal to another dimension." "We need to find out where this ceremony will take place and stop it," Mike affirmed, determined. "If we can interrupt this, we might be able to prevent a disaster." Dr. Thompson managed to track the ceremony's location to an old mansion located outside the city. The group prepared for a mission to infiltrate the mansion and stop the ritual. They arrived at the mansion at night when darkness enveloped the place, providing a cover. The mansion was imposing and decrepit, with broken windows and rusted doors. The atmosphere around it was heavy and threatening, reflecting the sense of imminent danger. "We have to be careful," Jenna whispered, glancing at the mansion. "We don't know what we might find inside." The group stealthily entered the mansion and began exploring the dark, labyrinthine corridors. The sound of distant murmurs and chants indicated that the ceremony was already underway. The feeling that they were being watched followed them, and the fear intensified with every step. Finally, they found a large room decorated with occult symbols and candles. At the center, an altar was prepared for the ritual, and several members of the sect were present, dressed in robes and chanting sinisterly. "We must act now," Dr. Thompson said, his voice urgent. "We need to disrupt the ritual and destroy anything that might be associated with the portal." The group prepared to strike. Jenna and Mike moved toward the altar, while Emily and Ryan tried to disable the energy sources and remove the symbols used in the ritual. As they approached the altar, they were confronted by the sect members, who turned to face the intruders. A fierce struggle ensued, with the group trying to disarm the sect members and prevent the ritual from progressing. While the battle raged, one of the sect leaders approached the altar and made a final gesture, trying to complete the ritual. Jenna, with the amulet in hand, ran to the altar and raised the artifact, attempting to channel its energy to interrupt the ritual. The amulet's light shone brightly, and a wave of energy spread throughout the room, destabilizing the environment and causing the sect members to retreat. The altar began to disintegrate, and the surroundings seemed to twist and collapse. "We're doing it!" Mike shouted, fighting off the sect members. "Keep up the pressure!" With a final effort, Jenna used the amulet to seal the altar and halt the ritual. The amulet's energy enveloped the room in intense light, and the threatening presence began to disappear. The sect members were scattered, and the ceremony was interrupted. The group managed to escape the mansion, which now lay in ruins, shrouded in an aura of desolation. As they left the mansion, the group felt a deep sense of relief, but also exhaustion. The fight against the sect and the ritual had been intense and draining, and the fear that more challenges lay ahead was ever present. "We managed to stop the ritual," Jenna said, her voice trembling. "But what happens next?" Dr. Thompson responded with a grave look. "The threat may be temporarily averted, but the sect may have other plans. We need to remain vigilant and ready to face any new challenge." The group agreed, aware that the journey was far from over. They had managed to interrupt part of the sect's plan, but the fear and the feeling that something was always lurking continued to follow them. They were determined to stay united and face whatever might arise, knowing that the terror they had faced could still return. After the confrontation at the mansion and the interruption of the ritual, the group tried to regain their balance and return to their normal lives. However, the feeling of unease and the certainty that the threat had not been completely eradicated continued to haunt them. The night after the event at the mansion, Jenna was the first to notice something strange. She was at home, trying to relax after the intense experience, when she began hearing whispers coming from outside the window. They were incomprehensible murmurs, as if someone was trying to communicate with her. The fear intensified when she realized that the whispers were becoming clearer, as if they were trying to infiltrate her mind. "This can't be happening," Jenna murmured, feeling a growing sense of terror. She tried to ignore the whispers and lay down to sleep, but the feeling of being watched did not go away. During the night, her dreams were filled with disturbing images of distorted faces and shadowy figures that seemed to be reaching out to her. The next morning, Jenna decided to share her experiences with the group. They gathered at a cafe, each bringing their own concerns and fears. "I can't shake the feeling that something is wrong," Jenna said, her voice filled with unease. "I heard whispers and had terrible dreams." "I've been having nightmares too," Mike said. "And I've noticed signs that someone is trying to break into my house, as if they're trying to intimidate me." Emily and Ryan also revealed that they had had similar experiences. Emily mentioned that she felt a constant presence in her house, and Ryan reported that his nightmares had intensified, with threatening figures appearing in his dreams. "The feeling that we're being watched won't go away," Emily said, her voice trembling. "It's like what we faced at the mansion is still following us." Dr. Thompson joined the group at the meeting and listened attentively to their concerns. He examined the amulet and began researching the sect and its practices more deeply. "It seems that what we faced at the mansion may have had deeper consequences than we imagined," Dr. Thompson explained. "The sect may have tried to use the ceremony to open a permanent portal or summon forces beyond our understanding." The group decided to investigate further and prepared to face whatever might come next. Dr. Thompson suggested they look for any signs of paranormal activity and try to understand if there was a pattern to the recent events. One night, while investigating in a paranormal research laboratory, they were surprised by a series of inexplicable events. Equipment began to fail, lights flickered, and a sense of intense cold enveloped the environment. "We need to find the source of this," Mike said, looking around with concern. "This can't just be a technical problem." The group began conducting experiments and investigations in the laboratory. Emily used a paranormal activity detector and began picking up anomalous energy signals in a specific area of the laboratory. The group followed the readings until they found a small room hidden behind a false wall. Inside the room, they found an old altar and a series of ritualistic objects. There was a sense of an invisible presence and an aura of malevolence in the environment. "It looks like the sect may have left behind some sort of legacy or a point of connection with what they tried to summon," Dr. Thompson said, examining the objects. As the group investigated the room, a threatening presence began to manifest. The energy in the environment grew increasingly oppressive, and a shadowy figure appeared in the corner of the room. It was an entity that seemed to have been conjured by the sect as a way to protect its secrets. "This isn't good," Jenna said, watching the figure with fear. "We have to act fast." The group tried to use the amulet to repel the entity, but the figure seemed to resist their efforts. The entity attacked, attempting to destabilize the group and prevent them from discovering more about the sect's secrets. "We need to find a way to seal this," Mike shouted, struggling against the entity. As they faced the entity, Dr. Thompson noticed that the room had symbols that could be used for a banishment ritual. With the information he had found, he guided the group in a new ritual, using the amulet as the main focus. The group began the ritual, chanting words and performing specific gestures to try to banish the entity. The energy in the room began to shift, and the threatening presence started to weaken. With a final effort, the group completed the ritual, and the shadowy figure vanished, leaving the room in a state of calm. "We did it," Emily said, breathing a sigh of relief. "The entity has been banished." Although the group had managed to face the entity and dismantle what remained of the sect's connection, the fear and the feeling that something was always lurking continued to follow them. Dr. Thompson recommended that the group remain vigilant and continue to monitor any signs of paranormal activity. The group decided to stay united and continue their investigations, aware that the fight against the forces of the unknown was far from over. What they had faced in recent weeks had left a lasting mark on their lives, and the fear that the threat might return was a constant. They were determined to protect themselves and others from any new threat, while continuing to face the challenges the future held. After the confrontation in the laboratory and the banishment of the entity, the group felt a momentary relief. The terror they had faced seemed to have been pushed back, but the trauma and the sense of unease still weighed heavily on them. They decided to take a break to recover and reflect on what had happened. Jenna, Mike, Emily, and Ryan found a quiet place in a small cabin in the countryside, far from the pressures of the city. They needed time to relax and process the intense experiences they had gone through. During their stay at the cabin, the group talked about the impact the recent adventures had had on their lives. Each shared their feelings and the difficulties they had faced. "This was more than I ever imagined," Mike said, gazing at the horizon. "I never thought our actions would have such deep consequences. I just hope we've done enough to ensure this doesn't happen again," Jenna replied, her voice filled with fatigue. Emily and Ryan agreed, expressing their gratitude for having been able to face the threat together. The experience had strengthened their bonds, and they were determined to move forward with their lives, though aware that the shadow of what they had faced was still present. While they were at the cabin, Dr. Thompson contacted the group. He had conducted more investigations and discovered that the sect had a long history of trying to manipulate dimensions and summon forces beyond human understanding. Although the group had stopped a major ritual, Dr. Thompson warned that the sect might still have active followers and that new threats could arise. "We need to stay vigilant," Dr. Thompson said. "The sect may have been destabilized, but we can't rule out the possibility that there are still followers trying to continue their work." The group understood the seriousness of the situation and decided that, despite needing a rest, they were willing to remain alert and ready to face any new threat. They knew their lives had changed forever, and that what they had faced was only the beginning of a larger battle. With their minds more at ease, the group decided to use the remaining time at the cabin to plan their next steps. They talked about the possibility of creating a support network to help others who might be facing similar situations. The experience they had lived through gave them a new perspective on the importance of helping others and sharing the knowledge they had acquired. "If we can help others avoid what we faced, maybe we can make a difference," Emily suggested. The group agreed with the idea and began working on creating an organization dedicated to helping victims of paranormal phenomena and investigating supernatural occurrences. They wanted to use their experiences and knowledge to protect and guide others. With the project underway, the group returned to the city and began establishing their organization. Although there was still a sense of fear and uncertainty, they were determined to use what they had learned to do good and protect those who might be in danger. The amulet, now carefully guarded, was placed in a secure location to ensure it did not fall into the wrong hands. The group knew the threat had not completely disappeared, but they were ready to face whatever came next. The experience they had gone through had transformed them, and they were more united and prepared to face the challenges of the future. The group remained vigilant and active, dedicating themselves to helping others and continuing their fight against the forces of the unknown. What had begun as an exploration of an abandoned building had turned into a journey of self-discovery and courage. Although the terror they had faced could never be completely forgotten, the group found a new purpose in their fight against the unknown, and they were ready to face anything the future held. As their story became an important part of their new mission, they knew that terror and suspense would continue to be a part of their lives, but they were prepared to face any challenge with the strength and determination they had found on their journey.